about 12:55 in the afternoon and I'm on my way to the hospital for another interesting surgery. But I won't burst the bubble yet. So make sure to stick around with me to know what we will dissect today since I'm going to take you on my journey through the rest of my day. Hope you enjoy it! After an hour, I finally reached my destination. Let's go! So now I'm gonna do changing the straps then proceed with our agenda. Now that I'm in my straps, let me show you the materials that we will be using for our surgery later on. So without further ado, my first segment is entitled, What's in my medical kit? We have my medical kit here which includes gloves, a washcloth, plastic cover, and of course, our dissecting kit with our dissection board. Take note that all of these are disinfected and sanitized using alcohol. If you're wondering what we will be doing with all of these materials, let me introduce to you first our special guest for this video, the pig spring. Amazing, isn't it? But before anything else, let us know first the different parts of the pig spring in order for us to understand the different terms that we will be encountering later on. So, what are we waiting for? Let us now proceed to the next segment of this video, which is the Q&A via Instagram. Yesterday, I asked you guys in my Instagram story to ask me any question about the brain. Also, I would like to introduce to you all my 4 medical interns as our special guests in our Instagram Live. Now, we will proceed to answer those questions, which is also the highlight of our videos. I told you, this is not a clickbait. Kidding aside, let's ensure that the brain is carefully placed on the dissecting board, flat side down.
But before anything else, here is a 3D model of a human brain.
Now that we have the brain here, let's answer the first question. Could you point out the dura mater of the brain?
The dura mater is one of the 3 layers that form the meninges. It is the tough outer layer of tissue that covers and protects the brain and spinal cord and is closest to the skull.
Shown on your screens are the left hemisphere, the right hemisphere, the cerebrum, the cerebellum, the brainstem, and the spinal cord.
Let me introduce to you guys the brainstem. Our brainstem is attached to our spinal cord. Midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata are parts of the brainstem.
The midbrain is one of the 3 divisions of the brainstem. At the level of the midbrain, the 4th ventricle has narrowed to form the cerebral aqueduct, which connects the 3rd and 4th ventricles. The region of the midbrain behind the cerebral aqueduct is called the tectum. The area in front of it is called the tegmentum. The anterolateral portion is made up of 2 structures called the basis pedunculi. I think at this point you're a bit confused about the terms that we are talking about, but it is truly amazing to know every part of our brain.
The pons is a major division of the brainstem. It is found above the medulla and below the midbrain. Pons is Latin for bridge and it was named because the anterior part of the pons, which is known as the basal or basilar pons, causes the pons to look like a bridge that connects the 2 hemispheres of the cerebellum. The pons contains many tracts and nuclei.
On the other hand, the medulla oblongata or the medulla is the lowest part of the brainstem, found below the pons and above the spinal cord. There is no clear separation between the medulla and the spinal cord. Instead, the spinal cord gradually transitions into the medulla. Perhaps the most important action linked to the medulla is the regulation of cardiovascular and respiratory functions that control our heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, swallowing, and vomiting.
These are the cerebral hemispheres. They are paired left and right, superior parts of the brain that includes more than half of the brain mass that is made up of ridges or gyri, and grooves or sulci. Cerebral hemispheres process huge amounts of information and other locations of our higher order thinking. It also receives sensory input from all of the sensory organs of the body.
This part is called the medial longitudinal fissure, which separates the right and left hemisphere of the cerebral cortex. The frontal lobe is important for cognitive function and control of voluntary movement or activity. The parietal lobe processes information about temperature, taste, touch, and movement, while the occipital lobe is primarily responsible for vision. The temporal lobe processes memories, integrating them with sensations of taste, sound, sight, and touch.
Cerebellum is Latin for little brain, and the cerebellum does look like a miniature version of the brain, as it protrudes from under the posterior and inferior region of the cerebral cortex. Although the cerebellum has many functions, it is primarily associated with movement. Specifically, it seems to be involved in facilitating movement by detecting errors that occur in the course of movement and correcting them. So, the movement appears fluid and achieves its intended goal. The cerebellum is also involved with motor learning to reduce the likelihood errors in movement that will occur again in the future.
Now that we are done with identifying the outer parts, let us now dig deep and separate the two hemispheres of the brain by carefully slicing through it along the center line, or also called as the longitudinal fissure, starting from the cerebrum down to the cerebellum and brainstem.
The corpus callosum is a large white matter tract that connects the two hemispheres of the brain. It is an incredibly important structural and functional part of the brain. It allows us to perceive depth and enables the two sides of our brain to communicate.
The brain's ventricle system consists of 4 ventricles as well as small structures that connect each ventricle called foramina. The first and second ventricles are lateral ventricles. The C-shaped structures are located on each side of your cerebral cortex, the wrinkly outer layer of your brain. The third ventricle is a narrow, funnel-shaped structure situated between your right and left thalamus just above your brainstem. The fourth ventricle is a diamond-shaped structure that runs alongside your brainstem. It has 4 openings through which cerebrospinal fluid drains into an area surrounding your brain or the subarachnoid space and the central canal of your spinal cord.
Thalamus encloses the third ventricle and is situated just above the brainstem. It acts as the relay station because a great deal of information proceeds to the cerebral cortex first, stops in the thalamus before being sent to its destination.
While the hypothalamus is a small region that makes up the floor of the diencephalon and is situated directly above the brainstem, it is made up of a collection of nuclei with a variety of functions. But in general, the hypothalamus is involved in controlling the 2H, homeostasis and hormones. The hypothalamus can maintain homeostasis by either exerting the direct influence over the autonomic nervous system or by causing the release of hormones. It manipulates hormone release primarily by controlling the pituitary gland, our master gland. Also, the hypothalamus houses the limbic center for emotions and mammillary bodies for olfaction.
The pineal gland is located deep in the brain in an area called the hypothalamus, where two halves of brain join. It is best known for the secretion of the hormone melatonin, which is released into the blood and possibly also into the brain fluid, known as the cerebrospinal fluid. The pituitary gland is about the size of a pea and is situated in a bony hollow just behind the bridge of your nose. It is attached to the base of your brain by a thin stalk and is often called the master gland because it controls several other hormones glands in your body, including the thyroid, the adrenals, the ovaries, and the testicles.
Shown on your screen is the white matter of the cerebellum that forms a branched tree-like pattern called the arbor vitae. It brings sensory matter and information to and from the cerebellum.
We will now cut one hemisphere in half to show the inner white matter and the outer gray matter.
Remember that the gray matter is the areas where the actual processing is done, whereas the white matter provides the communication between different gray matter areas and between the gray matter and the rest of the body.
Here's the gray matter, and here's the white matter.
Now that we have already answered and identified the different parts of the pig's brain, as well as their functions, it is time for us to clean all the materials that we used in the dissection proper.
Make sure that all parts of the brain as well as the disposable foam tray must be wrapped in newspaper and placed in a dedicated plastic garbage bag along with the gloves and disposable aprons. If blood is present on dissecting boards and instruments, immediately soak in disinfectant. Otherwise, wash equipment in hot soapy water, then rinse.
Last, but definitely not the least, disinfect the workplace and wash hands thoroughly.
And that's about it! We hope you learned all the essential information of the brain. See you next time, Tigers!
This has been Brainology. your one-stop shop for anatomy and physiology videos.